Security within an instance is never a joking matter, so it's important to understand how you can protect the data within your ServiceNow environment and ensure that those who shouldn't be able to access it can't. Access control rules, otherwise known as ACLs, consists of rules that restrict access to data by requiring users to pass a set of requirements before they can interact with it. I've uncovered several leading practices regarding ACLs, and I'd like to share these nuggets of knowledge with you in hopes that it'll help you on your ServiceNow journey. So, join me on this epic adventure where we explore the ServiceNow platform. Hi, I'm Alan Andreas, and welcome to Allenovation. In the ServiceNow Adventures with Alan series, I guide you through leading practices related to various areas of the ServiceNow platform. On our last adventure, we explored client scripts. On this adventure, I'm going to focus on a few leading practices related to ACLs. To start, it's important to understand the phrase default deny. As part of the high incident security plugin, which is activated by default on all instances, means that if there are no ACLs related to a specific table, then only users with the admin role will have read, write, create, and delete access to that table. This is controlled by the system property glide.sm.default_mode, which by default has a value of deny. The main point here is that when working with ACLs, the phrase, unless you're given access, you won't have access, rings true. Now that we know what ACLs are used for, and we also know what the default mode is, let's get into our first nugget of knowledge, and that is to avoid duplication. Conduct due diligence by double-checking that you don't already have an ACL that meets the requirements. There may be times when you receive a requirement to create an ACL to meet a specific need, but there's already an ACL created that meets the criteria. It's best to conduct due diligence and double-check first before creating a new record. Our second nugget of knowledge is to understand the ACL evaluation process. First, let's understand when ACLs execute in the query order of operations. For example, let's use a scenario where I navigate via left-hand navigation and click the Assign to Me link within the Incident Application menu to see a list view of all incidents assigned to me. This requires a query to the database to retrieve those records. Before the database receives that query, we're in the pre-query stage. During this stage, if applicable, any reference qualifiers or preset filters will be applied, then all before query business rules related to this table will run. The before query business rule basically intercepts the current query and can adjust it. As mentioned a moment ago, the current query is to retrieve all incidents assigned to me. I have a before query business rule that then adds that the records must be active. Now the query is assigned to equals me and active is true. That query is then sent to the database to find the matching records. This is called the query stage. After the records are retrieved from the database and all calculations are completed, we're now in what's called the post-query stage. During this stage, there's no other query back to the database and we're working with the results already retrieved. Now enter ACLs. ACLs are composed of 3 checkpoints to determine if a user can access the related resource. Checkpoint 1 is by role. This checkpoint will see if the user has one of the roles specified in the role list or see if the role list is empty. It's a good idea to specify the role or roles here directly rather than scripting a role check. If checkpoint 1 evaluates to true, then the evaluation process proceeds to the next step. Checkpoint 2 consists of a condition evaluation. This means that you're specifying conditions on the returned list of records for when this ACL would be applied. An example here could be that category is hardware. This would set the stage that the records this ACL applies to out of all the records that were returned from the database query are for those that meet the condition where the category is hardware. The last checkpoint checkpoint 3, is the evaluation of the script field. The script field, which is visible after you check the advanced checkbox, either needs to be empty, return true, or the variable answer is set to true by the end of the script in order for the user to fully pass this ACL. It's important to know that the first checkpoint to fail, meaning it returns false, the rest of the evaluation process for that specific ACL stops. Again, the user must pass all checkpoints in order to access the resource. Here's a bonus tip. In the ServiceNow Tokyo release, which will be generally available in September or October of 2022, a new feature related to resource access will be introduced, and it's called data filtration. Data filtration is applied to read queries and will run before ACLs, but after the actual database query, to help control access based on subject attributes. The design philosophy for data filtration was to create a method that is machine enforceable and human readable to protect high-value data in a declarative way. One of the goals with data filtration is to try and eliminate scripting in read ACLs, and depending on your industry your organization is in, controlling access to records with scripts wasn't an ideal solution, and auditors really didn't like this. Data filtration is also meant to help with reporting and troubleshooting. This is an optional free feature that can be utilized when you've installed the data filtration plugin. Once installed, you can create and update data filtration records after you've been elevated to the security admin role. Using the query process diagram from earlier, if you decide to utilize data filtration, here's the new order of operations per the Tokyo release. In the pre-query stage, the process begins with any reference qualifiers and preset filters. Then, before query business rules. Then, database query happens in the query stage. And after that, in the post-query stage, the results are then passed through related data filtration records, then finally ACLs. The third nugget of knowledge regarding ACLs is to consider the bigger picture. You might be creating a situation where an organization is financially liable for the new access you've allowed. If you're giving more access to data than what was originally established out of box, those actions could result in financial implications for your organization. For example, allowing non-ITIL users to have the ability to work incidents as the assigned to individual. This means that you've basically created a new version of the ITSM fulfiller license, and when ServiceNow audits that instance, the organization could be charged for additional fulfiller licenses if you don't have enough to cover those users. It's always best to consult with your ServiceNow account executive before making changes if you have any doubt. Another nugget of knowledge is to secure tables with ACLs. It's recommended to have at least one read, write, create, and delete ACL for every table, especially custom tables. Otherwise, only admins will have access to that resource. Additionally, when you have a health scan run by ServiceNow, you're going to have a finding that states that every table should be secured by ACLs. Now, there are times where you may want to completely lock down a table, and so you might think you don't want to have any ACLs, as ACLs allow access. But in the end, the discrepancy is that you don't have ACLs for that table. If you're truly trying to lock down a table, one method you can use is to create the read, write, create, and delete ACLs, but then apply the nobody role to it. This would mean that no one, not even admins, as the nobody role takes precedence over the admin override option, can access the object. Alternatively, you can create those ACLs, but just allow admin to have this access. This helps check the box that you have those ACLs set up. Nugget of knowledge number 5 is that you should consider creating list edit ACLs for fields that have very strict UI policies or client scripts on them, or for fields you simply don't want changed in list view. The thinking here is that if you have very strict UI policies or client scripts on certain fields, you're doing that for a specific reason, such as trying to limit the options a user could select. However, if a user is able to edit that field in list view, those form-specific UI policies or client scripts won't execute, and it'll allow the user to change the field selection to something you don't want them to. Another example is the security incident state field. You wouldn't want this changed from list view, as there's a set process to those types of records. So you'd want to create a list edit ACL to lock down that specific field. Now, some of you may be thinking that you could just use an on-cell edit client script to handle this, but sometimes that option won't work for your specific use case, and honestly, using client scripts to control extremely important fields may not be the best solution. Creating restrictions on who can edit those fields within list view via ACLs could be a good idea depending on your scenario. Our last nugget of knowledge is to avoid glide record and glide aggregate in ACLs. Try and ensure that all ACLs, especially read ACLs, do not have glide record or glide aggregate API calls within the script section. Read ACLs are frequently executed, and having complex database lookups can harm performance. If you can prevent those API calls together in any type of ACL, then that is most preferred. It's recommended to try and utilize the role list field, condition builder, or if your instance is on the Tokyo version, review data filtration as a possible solution to handle this requirement. Let's review the nuggets of knowledge uncovered by our adventure of the ServiceNow platform regarding ACLs. Avoid duplication. Conduct due diligence and review current ACLs before creating new ones. Understand the ACL evaluation process, which goes from role to condition to script. A bonus tip was shared related to a new feature introduced in Tokyo called data filtration. This feature will help you create more declarative permission settings that's machine enforceable and human readable, all with the goal of avoiding scripting. Consider the bigger picture. Be mindful of any additional access you provide within your instance, as your actions could cause financial implications for your organization depending on the change made. Secure tables with ACLs. It's recommended to have at least one read, write, create, and delete ACL per table. Evaluate the need to create list edit ACLs for specific fields that are involved in extremely strict UI policy or client script scenarios to ensure that all users can't bypass those settings in list view. Lastly, avoid glide record and glide aggregate in ACLs, especially read ACLs. Those ACLs are frequently executed, and having complex database lookups can harm system performance. Now, this list is not all-inclusive, as there are plenty more leading practices related to ACLs out there, but I encourage you to conduct further research and go on an adventure of your own to learn more. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you've learned something. If you enjoy ServiceNow content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel and like this video. Once again, my name is Alan Andreas, host of Allenovation, and I'll see you on the next adventure.